Let's go to car. Let's talk about the listing agreement. But I like talking CMAs because that's the more sexy part. CMA, I mean, listing agreements, but I'm the broker. We got to do compliance. So here we go. We're doing listing agreements. So, Jose's
While that
laughing.
is loading, John,
What?
while that is loading,
Yeah.
listing signs, how long does that take to get made, would you say?
Depends how custom you want. If you want something super cookie cutter, they can do it pretty quickly, a day or two. If you want something custom, then you have to go through design work, right? So they'll usually have their templates, and if you like one of the templates, they can put it together pretty quickly. I would say a day or two. If you want 2 to 3 days. If you want more, it's going to take a while because you got to go back and forth on designs, right? So it's really about you. Once you approve the design, they're pretty quick about printing them, unless you need a whole bunch. But if you need one or two, it's pretty quick. So,
Cool. Thank you.
well, if they have the materials. So let's get into listing agreements. I went over how to get into your zip forms. I hope you remember car.org, log in, blah, blah, blah. Let's see if I have a listing in here. Oh, I already have it in here. There are multiple listing agreements, so please use only the exclusive one. If you're going to do an open one or a net listing, please talk to your coach or talk to me prior to doing that. This is, as you know, you have to disclose agency relationships prior to doing this. So that's why it's on the first form on this. Just want you to know, yes, we do ask you to do your fiduciary duty to the clients, which is utmost care, integrity, honesty, loyalty. Diligent exercise your reasonable skill and care and performance agent duties. So what does this mean? This means that DRE does not care if you don't know the law, but if you flaunt the law or railroad regulations, you can be charged as appropriately, even though you didn't know because you should have known because you're a licensee. So that's what that means. Duty, honest, and fair dealing and good faith. And this is the biggest one. This is where agents get sued the most. A duty to disclose all facts known to the agents materially affecting the value or desirability of property. Now, if we use a term materially affecting the value or desirability of property. Now think about all the buyers you have or have worked with. What are all the things that they would think of would affect that if it was on that property would affect the value and desirability of the home. And if you think about it that way, there's a lot that would come up. Does it make sense? And so I literally we have a clients where the buyers are suing the sellers because they did a foundation inspection. It came out to 15,000. We got a credit for it. They did a secondary they did another inspection for another part of the house. They'd inspected the whole house then. It came out, and then this revised from 13 to 60,000. The selling agent, the listing agent, and the seller determined, we found this after, that it was trying to upsell them, and they did determine it was relevant to the contract. Well, now they're in a lawsuit and they're about to lose. So you don't decide what materially affecting the value of the property. If you can imagine a buyer would think of this and want to adjust the price or not offer on a property because of this reason, it's a material fact. And I just want to put that out there. That is the number one way agents get sued because they work with their seller to hide material facts. All right, moving forward, let's go to the listing agreement. Wire fraud's real. Okay. Date prepared. This date doesn't matter. It's just a reference thing. So put the date that you're writing the contract you want to sell. The seller will always be now check. So like the house we just looked at, I said the husband probably died. They transferred it to the wife. A lot of times you'll see these older couples where the husband died and they just never did probate, never. It may be, they just never moved the husband off the title. So don't just default put both on title. You need to go through your call and ask them, but you only need to put who's on title. Right to sell. Oh, sorry, this is they were right here. I don't know why my assistant was using this to put her property management stuff together. I said, no, this is my learning one. Anyways, my teaching one. Anyways, grants you. So this would be Keller Williams Realty. Does that make sense? It's not your name, Keller Williams Realty. Now here's a kick. I want to start with begin date and list period. This is the number one thing agents get fined by MLS for. MetroList fines them all over the place. This kills me. I've had this discussion, I think, literally 500 times. I've talked about this, and I'll talk it to about 501 right now. Okay, so this date, you put in the begin date of the list contract. MLS rules say you must put it into MetroList within 3 business days of that date. No questions asked. That's it. What does that mean? Even later on, I put where's the on market date? Where's the on market date one? I forget. So keep going, right? No, went too far. Of course.
It's in the MLS one.
Well, addendum, yeah.
Yeah.
So even if you go to the MLS addendum and write a different day, they'll still require MLS will require, and this is where agents get stuck. I said, say I put today, August 12th, in there, but I don't want to go live for 2 weeks and then put it in the MLS addendum. We're not going to put it in MLS for 2 weeks. You, as an owner agent, will still have to put it into MetroList within 3 days of this day, and put the on market date as 2 weeks from now, and hit submit and put it in there. And it'll show up in your listings as yellow, and it'll say not approved. You have to do that. If you do not hit submit and get that non-approved status, it means you're not. So a lot of agents think, oh, I could just put in 2 weeks. They put in 2 weeks and they get fined because it doesn't matter. It's freaking 3 days from that date on the beginning agreement. No questions asked. We clear? So what I do as a practice, because I don't like to mess with stuff and I don't like to make my life complicated. So if I was saying, hey, we're going on live on and I like to go live on Thursday. We're going to go live on the 28th. I'm going to take photos on the 26th. We're going to get everything ready on the 27th. I'm going to go live on the 28th. What do you say? And they're like, okay, that works. I put the 28th in. What does that mean? Now, that means I don't have to put it in MetroList till the 28th because it's 3 days within that day.
John, is there an issue with them signing it with a different date prior to that 28th?
No.
Okay.
So you can agree to contracts for the future. You can't backdate contracts, but you can agree to say, yeah, I'll do that in 2 weeks, right? So the only thing that some agents don't like about this is 2 things. One is I don't like, what do you call it? A listing agent could go to them and say, I'll list it from now to August 27th. But I have never had that. Never had that done. Because the house isn't even ready. They said they need 2 weeks to get it ready, right? So why is someone list? 2, some people like to off-market the listings. Now, if you want to off-market, you have to put it here on the 12th, and then you got to go get a signature on your exempt form that MetroList has that says, I'm withholding it from market for these 2 weeks. If you have this date and you're withholding it from market on MLS for 2 weeks, you can market it, but that marketing only, that marketing, you can market it, but you can't put it on MLS. You can market it. That means social media, blah, blah. The problem is if you do that, when you go live in 2 weeks, it will show 14 days on market. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, if you just do the 28th and you say, John, I want to pre-market, your only marketing allowed prior to it going live is at your own brokerage, to the other agents of your brokerage, or your own sphere. And you can say, I have a listing coming soon. Got it? Okay. We're clear on how marketing and rules and all that. Everyone good? Okay. Make sure you put the street in there. Make sure you put the county. Make sure you put the county. Trust me, our auditors will hit you if you don't put the county in. Make sure you put the assessors parcel number. This is important. So if this is a mobile home, manufactured mobile home, you check that button. It's going to add an addendum, the mobile home addendum. If it's a probate, conservatorship, or guardianship, you would check that. Do we all know what those terms mean? Probate, conservatorship, or guardianship? And probate is if someone dies without a trust, or without, well, they may even have a will, but they still have to go to probate. Conservatorship means I have someone who is disabled in some way, incapacitated in a way that they can't make their own decisions, and I have conservatorship over them, and I run their finances for them. They can't legally sign because they've been deemed incompetent, right? So Guardianship is similar to that, but guardianship resolves around usually youth. Usually they inherited property from parents dying, for example, and they are too young to own, so there's a guardianship in place, right? So well, they own the property, but there's a guardian. So okay. List price, put it there, list terms. What are some common list terms people use? I know agents use this all the time in there. They will say, if the property does not sell in 2 weeks, the price will be reduced to XXX, whatever it is, right? And I know a lot of people do this as a way to get the listing at the high price and then get it to your price later on. And you can see what a disservice that does to others. Does it make sense? So to the listing. If you're doing this, I will do this as a compromise, but I am always gunning not to do that to my listings, but you can. That's a common thing there. Also, I often see common terms in here that commission, sorry. Hey, this is an old listing agreement. Never mind. Let me go back. Yeah, I was like, what the heck?
I was gonna
Shouldn't
say,
have
because
that.
this one looks different from mine.
I'm
This
like,
one-
Yeah. I was
That's
like,
an old
no,
one.
that's an old one. I was like, what the heck? That's
Come
not
to
right.
2025, John.
I'm glad you brought that up because I'm
It's
kinda
a
like
lot shorter.
Okay.
My
I just,
boxes
I'll
weren't
make,
lining up, and I'm like, what's going
well,
on?
yeah, let me make a new one then. I'll just do that.
Even our OP is human.
It is. I'm like, well, at least I recognized it, right? So, okay.
Does this form
So,
change often, or?
twice a year.
Oh, okay.
Just
Well,
when you start learning.
not every site, not every form changes every twice a year. There's CAR will release revisions of forms every but we have. Why aren't you showing up? Okay, that's weird.
It does that
It does
often.
that.
You have to go out.
You have to go back out, come in.
and come
Yeah.
back in. Yep.
It's glitchy.
Booty.
Yeah. All that money we pay for.
Exactly. How much money we pay them, and this is the
A whole
quality we
lot.
get. Booty. All right, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. Much better. I like this. Listing for dummies. Okay. Listing period, beginning, end date. We talked about that. Manufacturer probate. We talked about that. List price. We talked about that. Compensation to the selling broker. This is to you. Leslie, what do you put in that number when you present?
On well, it depends who's in on the table with me, but I like 3.
Okay. I do 3. A lot of times I do 3.5. So.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
I have never gotten 3.5, but I've never
Yeah.
asked for it.
You never asked for it. That's why.
Right.
So.
Oh,
You never asked.
yeah,
So, there you
3.5.
go. I often get 3.5 and say we're going to give 2.5 to buy side, full 6.
I used
right?
to do that when we could do 6 total. I would get 3.5, 2.5. Then I did.
Okay. Well, there you go. New practice, but you can do what you want. 3. Or if any, or you can do a flat amount. Additional compensation if the buyer, sellers, brokers, I'm represented. So this is not dual agency. This is some weird factor. A buyer comes to your open house, said, I'm underrepresented. I don't want you to represent me, but I want to buy the house. They can buy it, but you can ask for additional. So you can say, I want 1% more. If that happens. Rarely. I've seen it happen a couple times, but rarely that happens.
So is that when you're just writing the offer and you're not doing any negotiating or anything? You're just doing the contract for them?
That's rough. Yes, basically, yeah. You have to, all your activities are in the scope of selling the home, right? And then I would ask, they're going to sign a non-fiduciary too. Like, you're not a fiduciary, right? So this, you tell me what you want, I'll write it up, you sign it. I'll tell you if the seller counters, this is what they're saying, you tell me what you want, right? You know, if they say, well, what do you think? I'm like, sorry, I'm not your fiduciary. Make sense? Now you can tell them, I'll tell you what I think, but guess what? We're paying the commission. So, but that's for unrepresented. Does not apply to agency. Continuation right of broker compensation, identify prospective buyers. Okay. This is a clause sometimes used, and agents wish they use them, but didn't use them. They cry later. But if you put a number in here, like 90 days, I've seen 180 days. What it says is if I list and we go to expiration, I didn't sell the home, is expired, or even canceled for that matter. That I can, prior to expiration, me, listing agent, can give the seller a list of prospective buyers. What does that mean? People who made offers on the home that were rejected, people who maybe you showed the home to, right? Does it make sense? These people, and you can give them that list and say, here's a list of my prospective buyers. If any of those buyers buy the home within 180 days, for example, on this, the commission is owed to you still. So I have a lot of agents that do nothing here, and then that happens and they wish they did, right? And then I have agents that do it, up to you. But it only works if you give the list of prospective buyers to the seller prior to expiration.
Not cancellation. If they cancel the listing agreement,
You can
halfway
get this,
through,
you can give this to on cancellation, but you have to give them a list before they cancel. So
copy.
Have any of you benefited from this? Like as far as putting a number there and actually later down the line somebody bought the house that you showed and you got the commission? Or is that kind of rare?
there's been fights, yeah, and we've won, right? Yeah. So for example, there's this buyer and he was kind of shady anyways, but he wanted a home, gave the list. And what happened was there was an offer on the home. It was a cash buyer. He was below asking price. Seller said, no, I want to net this much. The seller went to see, we said no, rejected. They went to the home and talked to the seller themselves, said, hey, look, if you don't have to pay the commissions, you'll net, I'll give you this offer and you'll net what you need to net without the commissions. So seller calls the agent and says, I want to cancel. Agent gives them a list. They cancel, blah, blah, blah. Seller, you owe me a commission. The buyer bought it cash or came back and bought it cash.
You thought he found a loophole, huh?
He thought he found a loophole, yeah. So that's designed to get around that loophole because it has happened, right? So not saying it's common, but it has happened. And this is where it is: seller obligation to pay previous brokers. So you need to ask them, hey, I saw you listed this home 6 months ago. I saw you canceled your listing expired and we're listing it now again. Did they give you a list of buyers, prospective buyers? Can I see the old listing agreement? Because if they have that in there, you need to write that in there. Right?
And John, if they
Yes.
say no, but indeed, in fact, they did have something, how do you protect yourself so you wouldn't have to pay that compensation?
If they say no, they owe you a commission too. Actually, they owe both commissions. So.
Well, I guess is that something where you follow up with an email, or how do you get proof rather than verbally saying no? How do you prove that
You can put it in here, none.
None? Okay,
None.
and then they sign
Right. I
it.
mean, if you want that, you're worried about it. You want that. You can put none in there, and they sign it. That means it's legit. That's they told you no, right? Does that make sense? So that's the way you can do that. Items included and excluded. Please talk to your sellers, especially during the listing, about items they want to include or exclude. There have been raging fights because you forgot to exclude grandma's special dining room chandelier that's been in the family for 100 years, yada, yada, yada. And it looks hideous anyways, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. And trust me, there's been fights, and there's been fights over security video camera systems and ring doorbells and things like this that the seller wants to take. So you need to, when you're with the seller, say, is there anything that's attached to the house right now that you were going to take with you when you move out of the home? And they need to tell you because you need to write it in here. Now, here's the thing. Just because you write it in here, if the RPA doesn't say that, you're screwed. And actually, you're kind of at fault because the seller instructed you to exclude those, and you didn't counter those into the RPA. Does that make sense? So I've had agents pay money because they were told to exclude things on the listing agreement. They forgot to counter it into the RPA, and the buyer's like, "No, I want those. I want that video security system." And it's not in the contract. Okay, so leased items. And the good part about this part is they tell you commonly leased items, alarm systems. Usually if they say install your alarm system for free to sign a contract, usually that is a lease term. And usually it's 1 or 2 years with a security system. So usually it's not an issue, but I ask if you have alarm and they say yes, has it been more than a year or two since you've installed that alarm? If they say yes, generally you're not going to have a lease in place. Solar power systems are leased. They can be assumed. The lease is assumable. You need to get that paperwork and get the process. Each company does it differently in how they assume leases. The new buyer will have to qualify often. If it's in the lease, they'll have to have a certain credit score. They may have a credit score that qualifies them for an FHA loan, but the solar power company may have a credit score requirement that's higher than that, and they may not qualify to assume the lease, which will kill the deal. So please check on your solar. These are things why you need 2 weeks, because you need to check on the solar power stuff. Propane tanks, water softeners are sometimes leased as well. A lot of times propane tanks are leased. They usually, I forget the term, but I think it's like 5 years. If you do it, they end up ownership of the owner, but you need to check because they'll replace them every so often. So you got to see if that's in there. Leaned items, solar power system, windows, doors, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. This is, you'll see this prominently in SMUD. I don't know if they're still doing that. SMUD does an energy efficiency loan where you can come in and you can pay at, for your, as long as you get a, super efficient one, these things, and they'll put a lien and they'll put a lien on your house and put SMUD bills. They'll actually put it on your SMUD bill, I think. So you just need to ask them that, because it often doesn't end up as a lien item. It ends up on their SMUD bill, and sometimes they forget about it. But then when the house sells, we have to pay it. So, does that make sense? So,
Hey, John,
yes.
for leaned items, for example, my home, I got a construction loan for ductwork, windows, and and some attic ventilation that was all tied together. Is that technically a lien?
That would be, yes.
Okay.
Because it's leaned on your house, and so you would have to do these. Sometimes you see these energy ones, PACE loans.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, I've done a house like this. It's sad. Anyways, there's these types of loans. They're kind of in disfavor right now, but that they targeted like cops and first responders and stuff. Anyways, they did a bunch of energy upgrades, but they put the bill on the property tax bill, the payments, and so it's really hidden. The problem is when you go to escrow, it's going to say you have to pay off this loan. It's not part of the property tax bill. But if they don't know that, you have to be careful. So you have to know those things. Smart home feature sellers include smart home features they approve. So this is smart home stuff. So if there's technology tied, does that make sense? If you're all up in Google, you can turn your lights on and off. You need to some of that stuff is attached to the house, so you need to talk about that, right? All right. Properly market it in the following MLSs. You need to do primary, which is generally going to be Metro List. If there are others, you're going to put it in. This is only if you're outside of certain areas, Valley, South in the Valley, Bay Area, you may get some others, okay? Publication selling windows considered concessions. So this is your publication that says, seller, if checked above, authorize the broker to market this seller as willing to consider offering other concessions. No amount is possible. A concession will be stated in such market deals. See broker. So this is saying in MLS, I can say seller is willing to consider seller concessions, which means we'll pay a buyer broker. And this is saying I can do that in areas outside of MLS. I can put that on my marketing. I can put that in social media. I can put that in other places. Make sense? So if you need to have a discussion with your seller about this, that they are, does it make sense? That I want to put, you should be telling them you're probably going to pay 2.5% to get a buyer. Now, I would tell them it's negotiable. The buyer is going to put it with their offer, but it's probably going to be 2.5 or 3% when we see that offer. It is negotiable, but it's going to be much more sexy to your home if I can say you're ready to negotiate that. Does that make sense? And they're like, yeah, that's okay. Then boom, okay. Seller instructs the buyer not to use photos in marketing except for those required by MLS rules. This is if you have someone who is super scared. Sometimes they have restraining order issues, things like that. You'll see that where it's really hard, but you're really putting like one photo of the front, and that's about it, right? So, if you get that, talk to the coach, talk to the broker. It's more difficult to sell those homes. You have to be certain there's certain restrictions the seller's going to want, right? So, or sometimes I've had a seller do this and they're just super scared in life in general. So, timing presentation of offers. Seller instructs to receive as soon as practical. I don't recommend you check any of these. Here's the thing. If you tell people, let's say it goes live on Thursday, and you tell people we're going to look at offers on Monday, if you say that to people, put that in MLS agent remarks, confidential remarks, you have to have this checked and have that date in there. If you don't have that checked with a date in there, or the seller hasn't given you written instructions that that is okay, you are in violation of DRE rules. So I say, we just have a practice on my team. We look at offers when they come in. But if it's a super hot market, I can understand where this would come in. If it is, then you need to put a date and time in. Okay. Buyer supplement offer letters. This says seller instructs not to present buyer letters, or seller instructs broker to present buyer letters. Buyer letters are saying, hey, we're a family of 4. We love your home. We love it. It'd be perfect for our backyard, and my kids will love the backyard and the pool, as a way to try to entice the seller. Fair Housing, HUD, has said these buyer letters may assist in discrimination, because they may say, hey, we're with photos on them. We're a black couple. We're a family. Those are all protected classes, familial status, race, ethnicity, right? And now that you disclose these things from the buyer to the seller then has the opportunity to discriminate, because they can see these protected classes buyer. So they said, we don't like buyer letters. Now, they didn't say don't. They just said be careful, because they can result in the seller, or listing agent for that matter, doing discrimination on protected classes of people. Okay. So this defaults to not. If the seller insists, you can check the box and that says you're allowed to do it. But then I would have a conversation about protected classes and discrimination. So, okay. Investigation reports. Seller is usually required to pay for the natural hazard disclosure report, so that is fine. Just so you know, if there's a homeowner association, I always ask them I check the homeowner association documents. California law changed in the last 8 years. Now all the standard HOA disclosures are required to be paid by the seller. Okay. HOA disclosures are also part of the TDS, so they have that 5-day right of rescission. So if I get the seller disclosures out, and remember, as soon as I send the TDS, there's a 5-day right of rescission, no matter what. Even if they waive contingencies, they get a 5-day right of rescission. The problem is that those HOA docs are part of that TDS, part of the document. So if I give those docs 15 days later, because I had to wait and order them and get them from the HOA, I just did another 5-day right of rescission for them to back out. They could have released all contingencies, and now I give them another 5 days to back out because of that. So, and sellers are required to pay it anyways. So I always say, hey, look, part of the thing we have to do, this is required disclosure. The seller is required to pay for these. These are part of our mandatory seller disclosures by the state of California. So we're going to have to order these from the HOA. It's going to cost you some hundreds of dollars, but it's just part of the job and you're required to do it. And so it'll help you. And I tell them the right of rescission part, and they're like, okay, I don't want that. Yeah, let's do this, right? So questions on that. I generally don't do inspections. Sometimes if the property warrants it, I will do inspections. Sometimes pest, if there's a lot of pest issues. I would only do inspections generally 2 reasons. One, if the seller is willing to repair the house. Does it make sense? Bring up the issues. Then I would do this. I would do a structure and home if they wouldn't do it. Sometimes they are, sometimes they weren't. If you're in the Bay Area, though, just know it is practice. It is practice to have all the disclosures up front. They will generally have a pest and property inspection, and they will generally have an addendum or something to that inspection that will show what they fixed and what they didn't fix. All right, just FYI. So all these other are there. And this says, hey, if we ask you to do that, you're going to pay within 5 days. So I check those boxes generally. I pre-open escrow. I get the HOA docs. I have escrow, order the HOA or contact the HOA, get them to the seller to pay, order the HOA docs, and then get the natural disclosure report ordered right away. Questions? Someone asked Jordan, you had a question?
I had a question. So as far as that, I mean, Leslie had brought that up to me. That barrier does it kind of different, right? They do everything up front. We don't do that here in Sacramento. What's the reason for? I mean, I almost feel like there's more benefits to having it all done up front. But I know Leslie was explaining like, no, it's not a good idea because once certain things are done, they're in writing. Or can you kind of explain that real quick, like why? Or
Why is it that way? That's a I would say tradition,
okay,
honestly. The way the closing costs are split different by county is just tradition. It's just the way over time that ended up that way. So
so it's
when I
kind of
say
like
why does that barrier that way, and I can tell you, LA does it differently. If you're in SoCal, just about every offer has a 3-day rent back for the seller to move out. Like the seller does not move out till after close of escrow. And the LA, that's just how it is. Like they write 3-day rent. Here we're like move out before close. I have to do a walkthrough, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's just different based on practices. Is it better? There are pros and cons, but Jose, I do agree with you. I'm of the opinion that it is a pro because of the 5-day right of rescission part, right? I would say if you put a pest report and a home inspection on the property up front, you're going to get the buyers are going to get, and they're going to know the condition of the property up front. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
same
So
thing
you
here
get a
with
little bit
the
solid. So I try to get there. How's this? When I was flipping homes, and I flip every once in a while. When I flip a home, I do it because I want to make the house as
More
good as
like
possible.
like a certified buyer, right?
Was that? Yeah, yeah. You
More
have a
like
more.
like you have a buyer that saw all disclosures and more certified buyer.
Yeah, I mean, if you do that up front. So, for example, on my flips, or I've done this few Bay homes, which is nice. That 5-day right of rescission when you turn in the TDS, guess what? It goes away if they get them up front. If they sign them with the offer, no 5-day right of rescission. So
Yes.
oftentimes I can ask for offers if I do it up front. I can say I want a contingency release, and I will get buyers to do contingency release when I
Right.
flip homes because I already know the pest. I got a pest report on the flip home anyways to to fix those during the flip process, the rehab process. So I get that. So I have the pest guy come back and give a clearance. And then, well, sometimes it's more than 90 days, so they have to do another inspection. But I'm sorry, not 90 days, 120 days. If there's 120 days, they have to reinspect. Anyways, but I also have I pay like my home inspector to come out and he'll do a preliminary one on my flips, and he'll do a preliminary one that says he'll do it saying these are the issues, and then I pay him to I have my give him to the contractor like, dude, here, fix these. And then he fixes them. Then I have the home inspector go back and say, yeah, these are repaired. Here's an amended report. And imagine giving that to the buyer saying, here's the pest, we fixed it. Here's the home, we fixed it. House is beautiful, right? You're going to get a super committed buyer and no contingency really, those sort of things. There are advantages to that, in my view. But there are things that you may get a buyer on your home and then you negotiate later. If you don't do disclosures up front and they do inspections later, it just creates more uncertainty in the middle of escrow. You get more likely cancellations. And that's how we operate here in Sacramento. It's just different in the Bay, right? So in the Bay, you get less cancellations, but you get much more negotiation up front. Sometimes they'll do reports and there's nothing on there. So right at offering, we're saying, hey, we offer this, but we want you to fix item 1, 2, and 3 in clear pest section 1. Like you put it right up front. Does it make sense? And so that way you're negotiating repairs right up front. So that way the seller is aware what they want to do, right?
yeah, it's like you cut through all the red tape. It's just like boom, this is what we need. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
And so there's no prohibition from you operating that way here in Sacramento. You can do it. You just have to get your sellers to agree. The problem is when you do that, in the Bay Area, sellers are used to paying for inspections. In Sacramento, they're not. So you're gonna have to convince them to pay for the inspections.
No,
Right?
it makes sense. It's just interesting how, like you said, it's like there's really no wrong or right way. It's just preference. This is how they did it out there. This is how we do out here, and it's just the way
But
things are.
from a listing agent perspective, if I can make the seller get there, I'm going to get them there because it creates a more solid deal, less likely to fall out. I can get non-contingent offers. I get really serious buyers. Does that make sense? So,
Yeah.
do
you and your 3.5%, do you pay for them? I used to pay the inspections.
I could, yeah. If I got 3.5, if I got 3.5 and I got them to agree to this, then I would pay the inspections because the 0.5% is going to cover the inspection anyways. And I put a little,
Yeah.
you can put a little clause in here. I put a little clause in
Yeah.
the additional
other
terms that
term?
say, like, if I pay for these reports and this expires or it can't, or you cancel it, you owe me for the inspections, right? So I put it in there. So, and these, you have to put an amount. Don't say just owe me for the inspections, but this amount of inspections. So make sure you know your inspection costs for your people, right? But you should, if you're listening, you should know how much it costs, right? Does that make sense? So, okay. Exceptions to owner title. You should not be filling anything in here. If there is, you need to talk to your broker, talk to me, because that's weird. Seller intends, okay, this is important. If the seller needs to sell their home and use the proceeds of the home to buy another home, you must check this box. It adds form SPRP. Now, 2 levels on this, okay? The SPRP form is not tied to the listing agreement. It's got to be in the RPA. And what it does, it gives the sell, you know how buyers has their appraisal, inspection, and loan contingencies? The SPRP gives the seller contingencies. He says, if I don't find a property by this date, I can cancel and buyer, you get your deposit back. And if I don't get the house in contract, if I don't close, then I can cancel this deal. Make sense? So you got to put that in there. The problem is, if you check that box, the seller's instructing you to put it in the offer. Makes sense? Just like talked about the excluded items or included items, you have to make sure they get an offer. So when you get an offer and it's a great offer, you still have to counter that, and you have to say SPRP, right? And you have to put grandma's chandelier in the kitchen, in the kitchen, nook, breakfast nook is excluded from the sale. Like, you got to put those in. All right. If you forget, you are screwing your buyer. That means if you don't have this and your seller signs that offer, they have no legal way of backing out of that contract. They are stuck. They could end up homeless. So I want to impress upon you the importance of knowing the forms and knowing these things, because you are messing with people's lives at a deep level. The last thing you want is to have the threat of having homelessness with your sellers. It will create massive distrust and anger. Trust me. So, seller opt-outs, lockbox signs.
I forgot the SPRP. So if we forgot it and there's no offers, you could go back and do it.
No. The SPRP is a form signed with the RPA, not with the listing agreement.
Okay, good.
So even if you didn't check it, but they're going to sell by, right?
Yeah.
Then when you get an offer, you need to put the SPRP, you need to counter the SPRP into the offer. And in fact, for my listings where they need this, I know they need the sell by, right? I put it in confidential area remarks, and I literally have the SPRP and I have the seller sign it. And I literally attach it as a doc in the confidential. I say SPRP must be part of all offers on this property, right?
Okay.
So most of the time I get some, and if the agent doesn't send it, I know they don't read, which I don't really want that offer then, right? If they don't read, but most agents will then send the SPRP with the offer already signed, right? So make sense? Clear as mud? Okay. Seller opt-outs. They can opt out of lockbox access. They can opt out of that, which means you're going to have to open the door every time, which sucks royally. So don't get that. Fight for the access. There's another thing that will affect value of the property. I didn't talk about CMA. When I talk comps, that will affect it is access. If you make it super hard to show, you will you will get less showings. The more easy to show, the more likely you're going to get people through. So that will limit showings. So fight for this. And if you want sign calls and more offers, put up signs. Some places restrictive. Some HOAs restrict signs. Actually, they can't restrict signs. That's the law. They can't. No HOA can say no, but they can ask you to make it a certain size, or they can ask for your option. So I used to live in one community where you could put your name on it, but you had to make the sign like the HOA wanted, and literally you had to go. The HOA would tell you go to this sign company, and you had to make one. It'd have your information on it, but it'd be like they're designed, right? So additional terms. Broker compensation agreement, which is already in there. REO listing advisory. This is a REO, which is a bank-owned listing. You're not going to come across this generally. If you do, let me know. Trust advisory is if the house is in a trust. So if you look at tax records and it says blah, 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 trust, just note you'll need the trust advisory, okay? Short sale addendum is if it's a short sale. Compensation to your broker is there. Additional terms I want to go for broker responsibility. All these paragraphs are just referred to here. So if you want to say, what's up with investigation reports? This is item F3, but it says, look at paragraph 7E. And if you went to 7E, you would see investigations reports. So if you are confused about what a certain box means, go to the paragraph and read it. Pretty simple, which I love it. Disclosure about agent visit, select concessions, photography. We talked all about that. And then we get to entity sellers. So initial all here, initial at the bottoms. And it's you and the seller. Entity sellers, if they're in a trust, if it's in a corporation, if the name on title is not a person, or they're using power of attorney or something like that, then you put entity sellers. You protect entity sellers. You put the name Barnato Family Trust. Does that make sense? For example?
I had a question. So
Yeah.
I have a neighbor that he's not selling yet, but we've been talking or whatnot. So actually, when we were doing this exercise, I looked him up. His wife did pass away, and his name shows up, his name, and then trust. Does that mean, or what exactly does that
There would be
mean?
two sellers. So there might be, so sometimes that happens, especially when you remarry, or if they came in separately, it depends how they set it up. So sometimes husband and wives have different trusts. So she passes away. It just means, say the guy's Jeff. Jeff Martinez is the husband, right? And the
Mhm.
wife had her own trust, and it would be trust of wife. Does it make sense? Like, well, you want to put it here. You'd put the trust name here, right? Trust of wife. And then down here, you would put, what's the, sorry, to sellers. Let's say Jeff Martinez. I'm just making this up. So Jeff Martinez, she shows up here as entity seller, and you can put, trustee. Or if he's just, if it's only the wife, or if there's a trust on the other side, that means someone else is trustee. Now he may be trustee, or maybe kids from another marriage are trustees. Does that make sense? So
Well, because they have kids, and I'm assuming maybe the trust is, part of it. Is the kids are part of it too? Is that what that means?
yeah, it may be. So you don't know. So you have to say, hey, look, it looks like it's owned by the trust. So it may be two entities. It may be just, trust of wife, and it's a different person. And then also down here you have, you have Jeff Martinez signs down here, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So you may have two. You may have one entity owning half and Jeff owning half, right? You just have to check it out, right?
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
But you need to check that box, put trust name, and you need to put who's authorized signed there. If you don't check the box, then we're going to hit you on compliance, and you're going to have to do a bunch of other forms later. So I recommend you just check the box. Signed date. If they have a trust, if they have an entity, please put the title. It could be trustee. It could be president of the corporation. Makes sense. CEO. If it's LLC, it could be managing member or just member. Does that make sense? You need to find out their title if it's an entity who's signing. Make sense? When they sign, they don't sign trust of wife. They sign their name. Does that make sense? And they're a trustee, and then they sign their name. Right? We put the name in there. So if this is trust of wife, but it's really kids, and the kid is Susan Martinez, right? Does it make sense? That's the kid, and the trust is for the kid. Then Susan Martinez was signed as a trustee for the trust of wife. Does it make sense? So we see this messed up all the time, and then we're gonna have to ask you to go fix it, which is a pain in the butt. So your broker signature is down there. If there are more than one broker, you need to put the other broker here. If you put the other broker here, you won't have to do an AAA form, additional agent acknowledgement form. So if you do another broker here, if there's co-listing, then do that. If there's two brokers if you're going to co-list with another broker at a different brokerage, you have to get approval from me. We don't approve those often, but sometimes we do. So, any questions on the listing agreement? Okay, I just want to go over this Metro Listing Assisting Addendum. We're going to be done here. This addendum will always show up. It's going to be where you do your days on market. So you want to say it's the listing agreement dated. Now this is the date of your listing agreement. When you say what is it dated, it's this date that says date prepared. Oops, went too far. This date right here. So when it says dated, what does that mean? It means that. Okay. So dated 8/12 on the Metro list, properly known as, 123 Main Street. Okay, good. Oops. 123 Main Street. And then here, seller does not authorize broker to market the property per the coming soon status of the broker's MLS if the seller instructs to remove them. To not market unless seller gives written instructions to begin marketing on the property. And this is where you'd put, I want to go on in 2 weeks. If you do your non-marketing till this date, this provision will preclude you from marketing anything to the public. That means the only place you could do it is within the brokerage. Okay. Okay. Does that make sense? If you're going to have them totally exclude it, you can have them exclude it from dissemination of required no form. You'll have to have a form by MetroList that says exclusion and have them sign it. But then you can start marketing it. This will allow you to publicly market it without it being on MLS. Does that make sense? If they check there, but then you have to say, we're going to do for 2 weeks, we're not going to be on market, but I want it there. You put the listing agreement. This is where you put the listing agreement. Instead of the 28th, you would put it, you would put it to today, and you say, I want to go live on the 28th, so I'm going to go 16 days off market, but I want to be able to market it. So what you're going to do is you're going to click that button, and that's going to say, hey, I'm going to exclude it till 8/28, but this will allow you to market it. The problem is when you go on live 8/28, it's going to show 16 days on market. Make sense? So most agents click this box and just don't market it and just put it on the, but if you click that box, you still have to put it within 3 days of 8/12, and then 8/28, it's going to go live. Okay. Whew. Okay. This is something that always gets wrong, this tag. You need to check this. Clear cooperation policy does not apply. MetroList is privately owned. We do not have they have not complied with NAR's clear cooperation policy. So you need to check that box because you have to disclose that we're not required to do this. Make sense? So MLS data, that should print seller instructions. This is where they limit, like publish the MLS and taking images is limited to persons bearing appraisal if they want to limit photography. If they want to opt out of internet features as provided, this is selection. This is, I don't want it disseminated to Zillow syndication. You don't want to syndicate. There's a way if you want to put in listing, you don't want it syndicated to realtor.com and Zillow and things like that. That would check there. Okay. Any questions on that? Broker compensation advisory. This just says what we all talked about, which is the settlement agreement, which is buyer compensation is optional. Everything's negotiable, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So, possible representation of more than one buyer seller. I do want you to talk about this dual agency in a transaction. In California, you're allowed to do dual agency. That means you're allowed to represent the buyer if you're the listing agent as well. And you need to talk to them. In the event of dual agency, seller buyer agree that a dual agent may not, without express permission of respective party, disclose to the other party confidential information, including but not limited to facts relating to either the buyer's or seller's financial position, motivations, bargaining position, or other personal information that may impact price, including the seller's willingness to accept a price less than the list price, or the buyer's willingness to price the price greater than the price to offer. If you have a dual agency, often the buyers are like, I know there's going to be multiple offers in the house. Can you just tell me what's the highest? Or I'm going to give you an offer, but since it's dual agency, can you get mine accepted? You can't do that. Does that make sense? So I tell the agents, buyers who want to do this, I says, I'm happy to represent you on this dual agency. I have to recommend though that you offer at list price or above, because that's what the seller is asking for. If you want to come in less, that is up to you. I'm happy to show you the comps that we used, the seller and I discussed on justifying this price. And I'm happy to meet you at the office and we can discuss the comps and you can decide what you would like to offer. Does that make sense? They're like, John, but I want to know. I go, one thing I can tell you, offers aren't confidential. So I'm happy to tell you where other offers are. I can tell you where you need to be successful and win that house, but you have to be willing to go there. And if you're not willing to go there, you're not going to get an accepted offer. Does that make sense? Even if I'm representing you. And so I just put it out there. But you can't disclose to the seller if they say, sell it, John. I just need to get this out of my head. I'm willing, just do what you need to do. You can't go, hey, buyer, you should offer on this home because the seller is really desperate and I can kind of get you lower. You say that, you violated fiduciary duty to the seller. Same thing on the buy side. You go to the seller, they're like, we want to come in 25 under, but if we have to go this price, we will. If the buyers tell you that, you go to the seller's like, well, this is low. We want to counter. You're like, counter to list price. They'll pay it. You say that, you violated buyer fiduciary duty. Makes sense on a dual agency. It's very easy to violate fiduciary duty, but I want you, so please be know. So how do I handle that? Sellers will be like, John, what should we counter? And I can't say anything what the buyer said. So I'm going to say, hey, seller, I brought the comps again, even updated since we listed the property so that you can see the comps that recently happened in your neighborhood. And we can discuss if you think this is a good offer or we should counter. Does that make sense? So you can say that. Also, a dual agent is obligated to disclose known facts, materially affecting value and desire of the property to both parties. Now, well, you're required to do it anyways, but that doesn't go away. So you have to disclose that. Okay. That's it for housing. If you want to know what the protected classes are, they are here. That means you cannot discriminate against those classes. I think that's it. Seller's advisory is pretty straightforward. Consumer privacy obviously pretty straightforward. One thing about seller advisory I want you to know, and I tell the sellers, we are a seller disclosure state. The seller, and the listing agent for that matter, is required to disclose any known material defects or property affecting the value or desirability of the property to the buyer. And if they do not, they have liability that the buyer can sue them. And there's statute of limitations, I believe, 4 years from the time of, it's not even 4 years, it's 4 years from the time of discovery that it happened, that they hid something. So, that they are disclosed. So there are disclosures that are required. And I recommend, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that you disclose everything you know that materially affects the value desired of the property. In fact, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, can we talk about if there are any defects with the property that you're aware of right now? Any appliances not working, any roof leaks, any toilets leaking, damage to the house, that it wasn't repaired, yada, yada, yada. Does that make sense? So you're prepared for that when you disclose that. So, okay. That is the whole presentation. I appreciate you sitting here for a couple hours for the listing agreement and the CMA process. I hope you found this valuable for yourself. This is also recorded. Give it a couple days. It'll end up on our YouTube channel under Kitty-Sack Metro. So if you just go to YouTube, Google Kitty-Sack Metro, subscribe to our channel, you will see these posted there if you want to go back and learn these. So, but I appreciate your time. I know it is valuable. Go sell some homes. I appreciate you all. Have a great day. So,
Thanks, John.
thank you, everyone.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome, Olga.
Thanks,
Thank you.
John.
Bye.